And so it was clear that once you buy into this notion that we need some more to be satisfied, like we will never be satisfied, right? There's no way to fulfill that because we're starting from the wrong spot. And so it was in the fall of 22 that I realized that, if I closed the bar, and immediately I started feeling happier. I was reconnecting with my family. I was recentering myself. I was, meditating more, consistently again. And so what I realized is that actually it's the opposite of that instinct of mooring that is the pathway to satisfaction and happiness. And I call it the path of lessening. Because this idea that we need more, in order to be satisfied is actually the big myth that we're trained to believe, when in fact we are whole and complete from the very beginning.
Welcome to the Soulful Sound podcast, where you will find conscious, inspiring content to support your healing and transformation. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation for you to be part of our community, where more insightful conversations await to guide you to heal, grow, and thrive. Simply click the subscribe button. It means the world to me, and your engagement is a big part of us reaching the hearts of other beautiful souls like you. Thank you so much for joining. Sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are. Welcome back, everyone, to the latest episode on the Soulful Sound podcast. I'm joined by the awesome Billy Wynne, who is the author of The Empty Path, Finding Fulfilment Through the Radical Art of Lessening. A student of Buddhism and mindfulness for 30 years, he received meditation teaching certification under Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, and lay Zen Buddhist ordination from the Zen Center of Denver, where he now teaches classes and serves on the board. Yes, welcome in, Billy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Now, I love to start all of my conversations off with a bit of background about you and how you got into the path that you are today. Anything you feel called to share.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate that. And I share pretty openly in the book about my childhood experiences and all of the different factors, the causes and the conditions that brought me into the Zen path and ultimately led me to write this book. But in a nutshell, I had a relatively comfortable early childhood. And then my parents got divorced. My father went bankrupt. He had to step down from his political position due to some alleged misconduct. And then he ultimately went to prison when I was in high school. So really my kind of adolescent experience was one of the world around me sort of crumbling, and felt a bit of loss. I experienced depression in college, and was just trying to make sense of it. And at that time, I did get exposed to Eastern religion, Taoism, Buddhism, studied that a bit, minored in religion in college. And then kind of life began, started to work, met my wife, had my children. And as they were growing up, I began to notice that I hadn't resolved, these issues from as many of us can probably relate to, the issues from my childhood, and just a kind of a feeling of inadequacy, in my life. And so I started to get some psychotherapy, and then about 10 years ago I started practicing mindfulness meditation, and about 8 years ago I joined the Zen Center of Denver. And so that has been a very transformative path, and bringing us up closer to the present. I stopped drinking alcohol about 6 years ago. And then in 2020, my wife and I started an alcohol-free bar called Awake. And it was a beautiful place. I'm really glad that it happened. But what I found was that first of all, I continued to maintain my day job. I had my family. I had all these things going on. And I thought I could basically like double my, stress load and workload. And I was, frankly, kind of spinning out of control, trying to run this bar restaurant and maintain the other aspects of my life. And that was really the lesson that I learned that really spawned the inspiration for the book. Because by August of 22, I was as stressed as I had ever been. I was unhappy. My relationships were fraying. And I realized that, I had bought into this myth that I needed to be more in order to be satisfied and happy, right? I needed to get more things, do more things, have more impact, have more relationships. And so the alcohol-free bar was a perfect example of that because it wasn't enough just to stop drinking alcohol. I had to, start a bar for people to go have non-alcoholic drinks. And not only that, once we started to succeed, I wanted to do franchising, and I had licenses for franchising across the country. And I was talking to people in the UK about opening alcohol-free bars there. It's all true stories. And so it was clear that once you buy into this notion that we need some more to be satisfied, like we will never be satisfied, right? There's no way to fulfill that because we're starting from the wrong spot. And so it was in the fall of 22 that I realized that, if I closed the bar and immediately I started feeling happier, I was reconnecting with my family, I was recentering myself, I was, meditating more, consistently again. And so what I realized is that actually it's the opposite of that instinct of mooring that is the pathway to satisfaction and happiness. And I call it the path of lessening. Because this idea that we need more, in order to be satisfied is actually the big myth that we're trained to believe. When in fact we are whole and complete from the very beginning, right? We don't need to be more. We are perfect just as we are. We may have needs, we may have relationships that need some care, but if we can approach them from this sense of like sort of inherent sufficiency and fulfillment, then we're going to, I think, find more peace and joy and love in those relationships and other activities of our life. So that was the kind of basic insight and that I experienced that I sat down in October of 22 and started to write this book.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing so openly. There's so much to pull from that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because I always, when I listen to people's stories and their what I will call moments of transformation, they happen in very different ways. And I'm curious for you, as an adult, when you got to the point where you realized, hang on, there's still some healing to be done here. I still need to look at some of the things that I, have worked on or may have worked on. Was there a particular kind of aha moment that brought you there? Or was it just the kind of accumulation of moments that you felt over time, the message was nudging you that something needed to shift at that point?
Yeah, so there's two. I look at life as it's like a wheel, right? That's always turning. And so if we think that we have resolved all of our challenges, right, and that that it's smooth sailing from here, then we're in trouble, is my opinion, right? Something's going to come back and bite us pretty soon. So I look at it as more like, it's a cycle, and it's a daily, in terms of mindfulness and getting right with our lives. It's a daily moment to moment practice in my experience. But I'll share two moments with you, and the first is the one that I briefly referenced in terms of about 10 years ago when I was starting therapy for anger management, started to get into mindfulness meditation, and then shortly after got into the path of Zen Buddhism. And I do write about this in my book, and it was really in my parenting and with my two children and finding myself, frustrated, yelling at them, really dysregulated, right, in my parenting and realizing that was not the way that I wanted to be. And so that was really the necessity for me to begin taking a new path and realizing that, this thinking that I had, even though I had some therapy before and other work before, that I had somehow resolved these complicated issues from my childhood and of human experience, was wrong, and that I needed to do more. So then fast forward to the fall of 22, when I'm closing or still at this point running the Awake alcohol-free bar, and I'm driving home. I also wrote about this in the book. 11:30 at night, and which was late for me. It was a non-alcoholic bar, so we're up until 3 a.m. or anything. And my knee is on the wheel of my car. My thumbs are on my phone, and I'm responding to a poor Google review of the bar, as I unfortunately occasionally found myself doing. And I'm pulling onto the highway in Denver, and I had this thought. I was like, I could die now, and then kind of out of nowhere, the next thought was that would be okay, right? That this stress is overwhelming. And maybe, and I had never, had mild depression. I'd never had suicidal thoughts. So the fact that this, I don't know if I would characterize it as suicide, but definitely an ambivalence about whether I would live or die really scared me. Really, really, truly, I was like, oh, well, it's obvious that I need to take a different course. And that this, idea that I have to keep adding more and more and more to my life, and that the next more thing is going to be the thing that satisfies me, is false. And it's causing my suffering, not solving my suffering. So that was a very, very pivotal moment and within a week, I decided to close the bar and kind of start to put my life back together again. So.
Yeah, definitely pivotal. It was just a week's
Yes.
kind of transition from
Yes.
that moment. And I mean, they're both really beautiful nuggets. One based on the necessity, I need to change something here. And that often comes through in our reflections in relationships, parents, partners, and family. So it's so beautiful that that was a necessity. I think that's a beautiful word to pull. And then, of course, kind of facing death or facing yourself in that possibility. And when you first said that you thought that's okay, my initial instinct was, oh, you made peace with it, as opposed to I'm
Mm-hmm.
fearing it. And so it's interesting
Uh-huh.
for me
Interesting.
how
Yes.
that kind of reflects each other in a way as well, which is quite cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I would say that particularly in my Zen practice, I am at peace with the fact of death.
Hmm.
But I'm not inviting it soon. That's
Yes,
how I kind of look at it, right?
that's that.
The idea, really at that moment in my mind, the it was a reflection of the overwhelming stress and really sadness and frustration that I was feeling at the
Yes.
time that created that, which is different from saying I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful, for what I've had, and this is a fair deal. Someday I'm going to pass away and move on, and I will not complain.
Mhm.
But so that I think is a something I cultivate, and I think is a nice relationship with death.
Yeah.
But to seek it as an outlet from fear and stress is maybe
Yeah,
not a centered place to
not the
look at that.
same.
Yes.
Beautiful. Now, let's talk about emptiness because I know that
Yeah.
this word often, when we use it, has a negative connotation. Or that
Yeah.
my life feels empty, or there's this emptiness or void, or those are the kind of words that come up often when people talk about it. And I know that Buddhism, and for you, you wrote about this very particularly in the book. It's very different. So, can you talk about
Yes.
emptiness and what that is?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And the reason for that perception of the word and kind of is why I think emptiness is often ignored or just brushed past in most Buddhist writing, whether it's kind of traditional Buddhist writing or kind of the more popular Buddhist writing that a lot of us engage with, that we may be curious about. And that was one of my inspirations for writing the book. There's a lot of writing about happiness and love and compassion and peace and serenity and these different benefits of Buddhist path. But for me, to leave out this really core teaching of emptiness is to point out the rest of these teachings is kind of incomplete. Right? We're not going to quite get there if we can't start to look at this core Buddhist idea of emptiness, acknowledging that on its face it doesn't sound particularly inspiring, but for me it is the gateway to the resolution of our suffering and peace and satisfaction and fulfillment in our lives. And so that's why I really dedicate the book to exploring it. And I look at different kind of lenses for understanding this core concept of emptiness. Because to just write a definition in sort of a Webster's dictionary, or Oxford dictionary perspective, is not really going to get us there. It's a complicated and difficult to understand and personally relate to concept. So I use a couple of different ways to try to access this idea of emptiness, and I'll share two of them just briefly as I can with you. The first is impermanence, and so that's another kind of Buddhist term, but really all it means is everything kind of comes into being and eventually falls out of being. So if it's a living thing, it's born, it lives, and it dies, right? Or if it's like this cup, so at some point in the past this cup didn't exist. Now it exists, and someday it won't exist. It'll go in the trash can, or it'll break, or it'll whatever. So that's impermanence in a nutshell. But there's another feature of impermanence, which is more of a moment to moment aspect of reality, in the sense that we're always changing. If you think about it, like our cells are combining and living and dying, and our atoms are swirling, and our mindset is changing, and our relationships are changing. And the person that I was yesterday is not the person who I am today. And my interests have gradually shifted, and my experience of things has gradually shifted. So that's also impermanence, in the sense that all things, moment to moment, are changing, in a sense, kind of born anew, right? Coming forth fresh and alive in each new moment in a different way. So that is one sort of avenue for starting to peek into this core teaching of emptiness, that things are not permanent. They're not fixed like we kind of imagine them to be. They are constantly in flux and changing. The other lens that I try to present in the book is what Buddhists call no self. But basically what that means is that the way that we think of things is having this kind of coherent identity. It's that, and it's only that, is mistaken, right? And things are actually derived from kind of in a vast and ultimately unknowable array of factors. So I like to use the example of a chair, for example. Like I'm sitting on a chair right now. There's a seat, there's a backrest, there's legs, to the chair, there's fabric, there's wood, there's metal in the bolts. Those are all different parts of the chair. So the question is, well, which one of these things makes the chair a chair? Right? You could say, well, maybe it's the seat, but if I took the seat out, you'd say, oh, well, there's a chair, but the seat is missing. Okay, so the seat doesn't make a chair. And it's like, is it the best? So you can kind of work through the different pieces of it and consider, where is the chair, right? It's these combination of things, but there's no one thing that is what I can rely on to call it a chair. And that's just sort of the beginning, because there's the mines that the metal came from for the bolts, and there's the trees that the wood came from for the legs, and there's the manufacturing plant, and the people who conceived it and put it together and brought it to us. So that those are also other factors that are reason that this chair is sitting here underneath me. And none of those things in and of themselves make the chair a chair. So this is starting to get us closer to this idea of, we have assumed that all things have a coherent and identity that has some permanency to it, including our own selves. And if we look at them very closely, calmly, we might start to see that they don't. And so, then what does that mean then for how we relate to things? So back to the chair, it's like, I'm not going to fall through. It's still here, right? But my attachment to this idea of a chair is starting to soften, right? My gaze at this chair, and ultimately to myself and the people around me, is starting to soften, and I can be a little less attached to what I think that thing is, or what that person is, or what they should be, and look deeper and see that actually what's going on here is much more complicated, much more beautiful, much less, much more different from what I kind of preconceive and imagine it to be. And then we start to see what it really means to be in compassion, or what it really means to be in love. Because when things are empty, they're not separate, right? These boundaries that we imagine to be between us are not actually there. They're all part of this construct we have of me and others, and I'm over here and this cup's over there. And again, if we take a patient look at it, those ideas of separation start to fade.
That's beautiful. And then there's so many different types of chairs, and then people sit in them in so many different ways, and so on and so forth. I love that.
Totally.
Beautiful,
Sometimes we stand on a
practical.
chair. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Now I particularly want to come to the subtitle of the book, because there are two words in there. I mean, it's beautifully written, but there are two words in there that really stand out for me. So it's that finding fulfillment through the radical art of lessening. So radical, I want to speak to that, because that really is speaking to me. And then lessening, as opposed to lessening, that you brought the energy of the verb, or the doing, the lessening into it. So speak to me about that. I'm really curious about that.
Sure, thank you. So I think, what I'm talking about is a radical reorientation of our relationship to the world and to others. At the heart of this, what I'm talking about is the resolution of suffering, the peace in our lives that we can trust. It's Christians call it salvation. I mean, I'm trying to get to the root here. And getting to the root and resolving our suffering, I suggest requires not just, the next wellness retreat, not just the new meditation practice, not the next book, not the next teacher, although some of the things may be very nourishing and helpful for us. But it really requires, what St. John of the Cross says, to become that which you are not, you have to go by the way which you know not. So what we have been thinking about ourselves and what we've been doing before, at least speaking for myself, has not worked. Right? I'm, still frustrated, still angry, still not at peace with my life. So maybe that opens up to the possibility of trying something very new. And that's why this is radical. This is saying that this identity that we thought we had, right? This relationship with others where there's like, I'm over here and you're over there, that we've always imagined to be the case. And even our relationship to the physical objects around us, our material possessions and so forth, is exactly wrong. It's exactly wrong, right? There is no self, there is no other. And so the more intimate and personally sort of embodied and embracing we can get with that new way of being with things, then we have this opportunity to be truly at peace with our lives in a way that I believe is not really available if we have that traditional mindset. So that's a bit of a, why I think this really is a radical thing. I'm asking a lot, for people to consider here, really, if you want to get to the heart of it. And then lessening. Yeah. So again, it gets to this idea that this is, I don't believe in, I talk about how enlightenment, which is another Buddhist is a really challenging word because it implies a permanency. It implies, and a lot of the kind of stories people hear about it reinforce this. It's like, well, if I can get enlightened, then all my problems are going to go away. I'm going to like levitate above the earth, and I'm always going to do the right thing. And and life, that is not how life is. I think we could all validate that to some degree, right? That is not the reality of our life circumstances. So really, what we're talking about is a moment to moment, minute to minute, day to day practice of an intention and a cultivation of this approach to things as lessening, which means not necessarily, I'm not asking people to quit their job or abandon their family or, get rid of all of their possessions or that, to pretend that, material comfort isn't vital and important or that relationships aren't important. And I'll come back to that. But that's a danger in the teaching that I'm offering, is that it comes across as like bypassing or ignoring kind of the needs that we all have and some of us, don't have met. So what lessening is about is changing the way that we relate to these aspects of our lives. So it's not that we don't need the food and the relationship and the home and so forth. It's how do we believe that those are the things that are going to, fulfill us inherently in the truest sense. And the answer is that no matter who we are, no matter where we are, no matter what our circumstance, I believe we are worthy of love. We are inherently, meaningful and satisfied and beautiful, luminous beings. And so if we can embrace that, then our relationship to these things that we have or that we need, or our pursuits, our ambitions in our career, our aspiration for deeper love with our partner and so forth, we are going to be more at peace as we pursue those things. And I believe, we will be more successful in the fruition of our dreams for those things if we have this lessening approach that starts with this statement, I don't actually need that in order to be a good and at peace person. That's already here, right? And then now I'm going to go and I'm going to be in a relationship, or I'm going to go to my job, and I can be with it in a totally different way because I'm not depending on it to satisfy me.
Yeah, very much an inside out approach. And I understand, for me, the word radical is very prominent because society and the external environment that majority of us live in doesn't support that. It is about more equals success. The more you have,
Yes.
the more you do, the more, and so on and so forth. So I think that's why radical was like, yes, it has to be, because we are reflecting against something that doesn't say that's allowed, at least
Right.
not loudly.
Totally.
Right.
Yes. I mean, it's sort of mutually reinforcing, right? I mean, I think that it's part of our condition to kind of, from the very early childhood to begin to believe that we are incomplete, right? And that we are lacking and that we need things in order to satisfy us. And so it's very natural and predictable that, marketing and, the message we get from society is penetrating into that feeling of lack and unworthiness, right? Because that's the way that we are, and that is the best way to motivate us to buy the thing or to go get the thing or to recruit us to the job, or so it's not necessarily malicious, or it's just the natural recognition of the way that things are. And so we have this false belief, and society is just consistently reinforcing it. And so it is difficult to break out of it. But that's what I want to try to do.
Absolutely. So let's get a bit practical, because I know that, what you're sharing, and yes, for those listening, it's very clear that it's not about not having those needs met and making sure that you can live in the world. We know this now, so this is beautiful. So what are some of the practical things people can start doing on their lessening journey?
Yes. So the book has really kind of three planks, and I'm going to go into detail in the third one. So the first is these, different Buddhist teachings and other, kind of ideas and principles that help us get to know this idea of emptiness, that can start to open us up to this different way of being in the world. The second is my own autobiographical experience. I shared a little bit of my life story, and the reason I share that is that I want folks to know that these teachings and practices, are about applying them to real nitty-gritty daily life, relationships and job and, hobbies and all of the forgiveness, all of these things that, we contend with on a daily basis. This is not a philosophy class. This is not about esoteric, blah, blah, blah. This is about how do we, what do we do today? What does this mean for the next moment? So then the third thing is mindfulness practices, and some of them are meditations. And so each chapter ends with a guided meditation, and I do have recordings of these guided meditations on my website at billywynne.com. So it's a little funky to try to read a book and try to meditate. So you can put headphones on and listen and just, sort of try to experience the meditation that way. So so one thing I do encourage people to do, and the, kind of the basis of many of these, and the first one in chapter 1 is mindfulness of the breath. So, connecting to the breath, this is a very typical mindfulness meditation practice, and it's always available to us. As Jon Kabat-Zinn says, if we're breathing, there's more right with us than there is wrong with us, right? So we know that we're here, and things may be going very, very wrong in a lot of ways in our lives, but we are here and we are breathing, and that's a good start. So also it's an embodied, sensation of breath, right? We can know we're breathing, but also we feel ourselves breathing in our stomach, our chest, our nose, etc. So it's a way to get a little bit out of this mind that, tends to constantly race and lead us off into various directions, and kind of come back home, to our body and where we actually are right here. And so I offer this, kind of dedicated meditation practice working with the breath. When people ask a lot, like, how long do I have to do it? How often do I have to do it? And just a couple minutes a day, is a good start. It's a really good start. And Jon Kabat, I reference him again, but so he did a lot of research around what he calls mindfulness-based stress reduction, and at the heart of it is mindfulness meditation. And what he showed was all these benefits, cognitive benefits, mental health benefits, reduced cortisol, stress levels, all this kind of stuff was documented in a very, kind of traditional Western way, which sort of needed to be done, to kind of help bring this into the mainstream. But those benefits are available to people who are beginners, who, don't meditate well. In other words, they sit down and their mind's racing, and which is actually true for all of us, but, some people think that they're not doing it right. And for just a little bit of time, per day or throughout the week, because a lot of the participants that came to these classes and these studies that he was doing, had never meditated before. And yet he was finding that you could reap the benefits. So a key message I want to give to your audience is that you might think you're not good at it. You might think you don't have time for 20 to 30, plus minutes of extended meditation. Maybe someday that will, be right for you. But for now, even just little efforts to reconnect with the breath, and you can carry that with you into the other aspects of your day, can really have a powerful effect on your life.
Beautiful. And how important for you is the intention of lessening in these practices? Obviously, I know you speak
Yeah.
about it for us to make that paradigm shift. So how
Yes.
important is that piece in the practices?
Yeah, it's crucial. It's crucial. And here's why. And I'll give you kind of an example. So the most important factor in establishing a consistent meditation practice, for example, is to forget everything that you think you knew about what meditation is supposed to be. Okay. And so this gets to the point of lessening. So we go to the grocery store and we see the magazine on the shelf at the checkout counter. And it's this, beautiful person in beautiful clothing on a beautiful mountainside with this, la 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 la, like doing this beautiful meditation thing. And so people are like, oh, I want that, right? I mean, that's what meditation is. And so I'm gonna, but that is not what meditation is. Okay. I meditate a lot and it's in my closet, in my pajamas, right? Usually in the dark. And so that's just the beginning, right? And then there's the whole mind state of meditation where people think they're going to stop their thoughts. They're going to have these, kind of blissful peak out experiences on a consistent basis. All this like lore about what meditation is, and it's not true. So what meditation is you sit down, you take something like the breath, you try to gather your attention on it, and within seconds, your mind is going to wander off. And you notice that, and that's an opportunity to mindfully, gently, patiently bring your attention back to your intended focus, in this case, the breath, right? And doing that over and over and over and over again is what meditation is. So on the one hand, it's simple, right? But on the other hand, it's hard because it is not the natural disposition of our mind. So anyway, the point is that the art of lessening is about putting down our preconceptions and all these ideas and judgments that we have about things like meditation, so that we can experience them more directly, and therefore benefit from them. Because these preconceptions, these judgments, is, oh, I'm not doing this the way that it looks like on the magazine cover, just get in the way, of us benefiting from these practices.
For sure. I mean, when I talk about meditation in my own way, I mean, I grew up in a very family that was heavily into metaphysics and lots of different spiritual practices. So I started, let's say, a meditation practice at 6 years old. And while I can say it was kind of leaving home, going down to the beach, having the sunrise in the tropics and meditating, yes, it's not always the magazine, but that's how my journey into meditation began. Having said that, now I find that even in vacuuming the house, like just hoovering around, that I can get into that meditative trance. Now, the reason I asked about intention, because I work a lot with that in my work and sound and bringing us into really relaxed states, is that really helps to direct the energy. And when I think about sitting and allowing and just being for the moment, as you said, that is part of the lessening in itself. And then holding that in your, setting the intention prior, or holding the energy of just allowing and surrendering, is so powerful.
Yes.
And it
Yes, indeed.
allows for so much more, like you said, how it then impacts the choices we make in moment to moment. So
Yes.
I'd love to talk about this, because you speak about how it helps us to kind of break through or overcome all the filters, right, that we have,
Yes.
and the obstacles that we put, in front of us. I say we put that in front of us when they're really important things in our life that matter to us and that mean something to us. So can you talk about a little bit more about the kind of obstacles that come up when we're in that more state, rather than lessening?
Yes, absolutely. And Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach talk about the two wings of mindfulness that I think is a good place to start here. Because the first is to simply be aware, right? To acknowledge, to recognize what is happening. I am vacuuming, or I am doing the dishes, or this person is annoying me, or, whatever it might be that is true at that moment is worth looking at, right? But then the second wing is non-judgment. It's or you could call it kindness, right? It's really just pausing before our very instinctive, reactionary, kind of habit of evaluating that thing as good or bad as pleasant or unpleasant, something we want more of, something we want less of. I mean, that happens in a split second with almost everything that we see or do or encounter. And so the core of the practice of mindfulness is to see what's happening and then just to give it some space to be, right? Give it some space to, and for us to be with it before we rush in and apply all of our different ideas about it and our, preferences and so forth. So I think that's really the heart of it. And that's really the key to translating this practice away from, we call it kind of on the mat or dedicated meditation practice or whatever it may be, out into when we are doing our activities of our lives and in the conversation and in when we're kind of starting to get frustrated and when we're driving the car and all those types of things. And really the practice is the same. The practice is recognizing what's happening and giving ourselves some space. And this is where like connection with the breath or some other tool that we can carry with us can be helpful to pause. And allow ourselves to recognize the thing or the event or the person before we leap to our judgment of how we're going to react. And so then we have an opportunity to respond from a place that is closer to our truer intention. What I call it, like how I want it to be when I woke up in the morning, right? None of us wakes up and says, I'm going to yell at somebody, I'm going to be a jerk, I'm going to, like nobody, but it happens, at least to me. So so to have a opportunity, to come back to that base intention is how we can help ourselves, come forth in a way that we are, going to be happy and satisfied about.
And I'd love to speak about the art of lessening in regards to work and career, because I know that a lot of people will have that question, like, okay, well, how do I do this in work? Whether that's, you're working a job or you're running a business, doesn't matter, kind of just in that workspace, especially when, we work to make a living, to, I don't know, get ahead in whatever way that means for us. Can you speak to the work piece a little bit, the art of lessening in that context?
Absolutely. And so there's, a couple of different ways, and there is a chapter about work in my book. And so I'm a career person and I've worked, and so I've seen this play out in a lot of different contexts. And so I think one is, again, approaching our career and our ambition with a different understanding that, it's not the next job or the next raise or the next opportunity that's going to make us happy. We have the opportunity to be happy now. And those things are contingent on conditions and other people and other things that many of which are out of our control. And so what we can, have better control over is our experience of the present moment. And I believe strongly, and this is true, if you are in finance or if you're in social justice work or whatever it is, right? Whatever your vision is for what you will accomplish, both for yourself and in the world, I believe that the only way to accomplish it is to embody it as you are pursuing it, right? So, and I talk about this also in the compassion chapter in terms of like social justice work and these, wanting to have a positive impact on the world. It's like, so there's two ways to go about that. There's the one way that says, I have this belief and I'm going to make it so, and anything that gets in my way is my enemy, and I'm going to, run them over, right? And the people who disagree with me are dumb and, evil, and they need to be crushed, or metaphorically. And so that's one way to do it, and that is a way that I've done things that way, and I've fallen into that mindset. I think it's not that unusual. Then there's another way that says, actually, this is complicated, and there's lots of different viewpoints about this. There's lots of different ways to try to resolve it. It comes from kind of an unknowable array of causes and conditions and all, So first of all, a little bit of humility in how I approach it. The people who disagree with me, yes, we have a disagreement, and that's real and that's meaningful. But to add all the judgment and all of the dismissal and all of the hatred is, only going to make our experience of pursuing this thing unpleasant. And I think contributes to burnout. It contributes to, I use the example of when I worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It's like, even when working with people in my own political party, and really we kind of shared the same goal and loosely the same worldview, we were at each other's throats, because it was about our identity, and it was like, I know the best way to do this. And, so anyway, so I think we're actually going to be more successful, and we're going to be more likely, to kind of realize in the world this vision that we have, if we can remind ourselves that how we are pursuing it is just as important as whatever we're imagining about that long-term goal. And so that also, I think, applies in the workplace. And I also, another kind of tool I use in the book is finding a moment to pause in the workday and be with something in this kind of mindful emptying method. So I use like when I was at the alcohol-free bar, I use the example of a Kalamata olive. Like it could be anything, and you could be I talk about my hours log when I worked at a law firm, or just these mundane things. If we can just look at them like we did with the chair, and just take a second, and I'm kind of rushing around, or it's the email, that's in front of my face, or it's the stack of papers that I need to read. It's like just a minute to kind of soften our attachment, right, to our idea. Like, for example, the stack of papers I have to read is like a threat, right? It's like this, it's this task. I got to get it done by the end of the day. I'm already getting, anxious. I'm thinking about it. And it's like, okay, just for a minute, just for the sake of lessening and honoring myself, it's like, okay, there were trees, there was sun, there was soil, right? There's a printer. This is really a magical thing, this stack of paper. Really, it is. And so just, we can open up ourselves up to that. Doesn't mean we don't read it, right? Doesn't mean we run out the door and, but we can be with our experience of even mundane, kind of ostensibly stressful things in a way that honors this underlying truth of things. And then we're going to be more interested in it. We're probably going to learn more when we read it. So I think that I just want to conclude to answer your question that people might be tempted to believe, and I certainly have been tempted to believe, that time we take for mindfulness, like even the 5 minutes we take to meditate, or the 30-second pause we take to kind of regard this email or this stack of paper, whatever it is, in a different way, is contrary to success, right? It's like we think that we're pausing from this more important pursuit of getting the thing done, but actually those pauses, I will virtually guarantee, will make us more likely to succeed, right? So the 5 minutes to meditate is not contradictory to our success in our career. It is extremely supportive and aligned with success in our career.
That's beautiful. So I know that lessening is, the way you've described it, it's not about having less. It's not that, as we've already discussed. Right. So yes. For someone listening who might find themselves in a position where they're not really very busy at all. They're in a state where life is, I don't have a lot. I don't have to do that if I don't want to, or I can just get up and, but yet there is still an element within them where they're not. Again, we know happiness is an inside job. So from the person who has all the material stuff, so they're not looking for more. How do you use the work that you do to help people in that place of fulfillment from that perspective? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, okay. It does. And I think, first of all, I think that's a great, example of the how misleading this ethos of moreness is, because then we get the more. It's kind of like the Olympic athlete, and I'm not an Olympic athlete, but I've read, some anecdotes of, their first person account of, they get the gold medal or whatever, and then it's like, well, now what, right? I mean, they thought, in other words, and now I'm just, kind of just projecting and adding in some narrative here, but like basically they thought that would be the thing that would fulfill them, right? They thought that would be the thing that would give them lasting peace in their lives. And often what they discover is that it's not, right? So it's the same with material possessions, and again, honoring that we all need our material comfort, and sadly, so many people don't have it. So that is vital to keep in mind here as we talk about these types of things, in my opinion. But the way that I work with people in that kind of situation is to come back to the beginning, the basics of who you are, right? Who are you? And really, in some cases, it might be this exercise of, okay, well, am I like my body? Like, am I my skin? Am I my organ? I can do that kind of thing. Am I my past? Am I my memories? Am I childhood? Am I my name? Am I, identity on paper? and to try to peel back these layers of the onion, and see what we find, right?
Mm.
And in some cases, we may find we don't really know, and so we kind of lean into that, and we're kind of this is almost like being reborn,
Mm.
to kind of to take away these ideas we had of ourselves as a success or as a wealthy person, or all these different kind of attributes that we may or may not have, or maybe that we kind of dreamed about, and to pull all that away, to come back to what's actually here,
Mhm.
and to begin to see that is the most beautiful part. That is the thing that the world can't give or take away, and that the beautiful house can't give or take away, and that it's it was there before we were born, and it will be there after we die. And this, I believe, I'm not asking people to believe something that I don't think they can discover on their own, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not, this is not, in my opinion, I don't I'm not trying to disabuse people of faith-based or spiritual beliefs, but that's not what I'm offering. I'm offering something that I believe you can see and verify for yourself, whatever your spiritual or faith tradition might be or
Mhm.
not be. So I think that we can, whatever our circumstance, and this is true for the person who, has gotten what they thought they wanted and now wonders what is next, right?
Mhm.
Or to the person who doesn't have, what they think they want, or and so it's universally accessible, in my opinion. Now we obviously will have different lenses and different experiences of it, but so in that sense, the practice is the same. Wherever you are and whatever your circumstance is, whether have 1,000 ideas for what you want to do or you have none, coming back to reconnect with this kind of inherent being that you are, is a good way to create what comes next.
Yes, I really resonate with that. And I wanted to bring it up because I know that to kind of drill home the point of that inside out approach, right? That it's not the
Yes, yes,
more the more out there or the less out there that determines our happiness either way. So I think that's really beautiful. And I've worked with a lot of people who, they were born into wealthy families and they've struggled with a lot of stuff, with all the material things that we tend to think are, the happiness. And so working deeply with self and really coming back into that core of who we truly are, I do understand and really believe for myself is fundamental. There's one other piece that I want to go into because I think I keep saying the inside out approach. For me, there is something that is in the core of that, and that is self-responsibility, understanding how
yes,
responsible we are for ourselves in the world.
yes,
We're not
yes,
alone, but we are responsible for ourselves. And I know that you speak
yes,
about this in the book. You talk about
yes,
it from the context of, I know that these are delicate issues, but codependency in relationships being, what we have to do and understand in terms of our responsibility. I'd love to know more about that,
yes,
especially when a lot of people sense or feel for themselves that it's not compassionate if they're not doing it for everybody else. Can you speak to
yes.
that
Oh
piece?
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, yes, very passionate about this
Mm.
approach. So, I think one way to start is to say that, I believe that whatever our circumstances, we do have constraints, right, in our reality of our lives to some degree. But in a very, very important way, we are free to approach the next moment, right, with an open heart. And that is one way that I look at my practice, is cultivating that openness to the next moment and having an open mind, an open heart with the next moment. And I believe that we all, whatever our constraints may be, to some degree, have a freedom on how we are going to face that next moment. So with that freedom comes responsibility. We have a choice, right? Again, within whatever our constraints may be, we get to choose how we react to these external, what the person is saying, what the market is doing, or whatever is going on outside of us. We get to choose how we will respond. And so it does, I think, really hit home in our relationships. And so that's why I do go into some detail about this idea of codependence. And I learned this from my teacher, Kate Gerstberger, who I acknowledge in the book, and gave me some of the tools to refashion that I put into the chapter around love. So I don't mean it in kind of the extreme clinical, version that might require some that can be real, and that's important. But I'm referring to it in a way that every relationship, I think, to some degree has, because the way I define it is codependence is believing that you are responsible for another person's mindset and happiness and state of being, right? And conversely, believing that they are responsible for yours, right? So the thought that, like, if I say this, then my partner will be happy, that's codependence, right? My partner gets to decide how they're going to respond to what I do. They may or may not respond how I predict they're going to respond, but ultimately that's their choice, right? That's not my choice. And conversely, I might say, well, my partner said this, and so now I'm sad, or now I'm mad. And so we have ceded responsibility for our own mindset to that other person. And it might even be not our partner who we love and care about. It's the person on the road who cuts us off, and all of a sudden we're angry. It's like, I'm so mad because this person cut me off. It's like, well, I chose to be mad, right? I didn't choose to cut myself off, but I chose how I was going to respond to that. And sometimes I'm like, that person's really in a hurry, Other times I get pulled in, right? I get pulled in and I react, and that person, I've ceded responsibility to some degree to that person. So, and I like to also use the explanation that the minute my wife and I got married in a Unitarian church in Charlottesville, Virginia, 22 years ago. Anyway, so David Takahashi Morris, and I mentioned this in the book, gave a beautiful homily at our wedding ceremony, and he talked about the traditional view of marriage as a knot. And I think this can apply to any relationship, but a partner, or whatever, a loved one, we can imagine this. So, but the knot signifies, this fixed kind of confining way of a relationship, right? We can't really move in a knot. We are stuck in a lot of ways. And he said one different way to think about a relationship is like this. So we're connected, we're touching, but we're free to move, right? We're not controlling the other side. We're not stuck to where we are. We can grow, we can shift, we have an independence. And then we come to rest, and he said very beautifully, like in a position that is familiar to us all, right? This kind of prayer, gassho position. So I think about that a lot in my relationships. It's like, is my love for this person based on, how they treat me and how they respond to how I treat them? And this gets to your original point that people think of this as like, not being compassionate, or but actually believing that my partner is responsible for me and that I'm responsible for them is really, very kind of condescending. And, if you really think about it, right? It's like to say, oh, well, if I say this, then my partner is going to believe that, is like, oh, I'm controlling them. And so that's not compassion, right? I think compassion and love is saying, I trust this person to behave how they are going to behave, right? And I love them anyway. That's love. It's like, I honor them that they are fully free and independent and responsible person. And I'm going to treat them, I'm going to come forth in this relationship with that understanding. And I, am going to behave in a way that I am responsible for myself, and that, I am free to choose how I react to these events in my life. And that's love of myself. And that is honoring that relationship for, I think, really, what it actually is. But also it's a loving and compassionate way to approach, how we interact with others.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And it's so important to have that reminder. I hope that really lands in someone's heart listening, because I think it's fundamentally at the core of a lot of this. And I know when I was growing up, and my mom would often say, when you enter relationships, don't go into a three-legged race. Stand strongly on your 2 feet next to someone else, on their 2 feet and choose to walk alongside each other, because that three-legged race, you're humbling, like stumbling about, and the moment the one person goes, you topple over, right? So she always
Yes.
kind of used analogies and beautiful stories, very practical examples that drew our attention to that. Come in as a
Yeah.
whole and offer yourself the love and compassion to offer it to yourself, so that that's
Yes.
the reflection in your relationships. And that's not
Yeah.
easy. It's simple,
Yeah.
but it's not easy.
Yes, indeed. It's very easy to get sucked in. And again, I think it's I always like to kind of take a little bit of a reality check when I'm talking about these things. It's like
Yes, of
we're human
course.
beings. We have past. We have these conditions. In Buddhism we call it karma. It's like to pretend it's not there is a really dire mistake.
Yeah.
It's there and it's going to keep coming back. And we just want to practice working with it as it arises and honoring it
Mhm.
in order to be with it in a different way and start to be able to respond to life rather than react is the way that I like to think about it.
Absolutely. And then that just comes kind of full circle back to those practices, why the pause offers so much. It offers you a breath to, your response, or a change in the direction you go, or and so on and so forth. So that's really
Yes,
beautiful.
yes. Yeah, Tarbach calls it the sacred pause,
I love
right?
that. I
Yeah,
agree.
it is sacred. It's the difference between reactivity and love, you know.
Yes, for sure. Now, there's so many what one would call self-help books out there. There's so many different
Yes,
approaches and so many different
yes.
things, of course. And I know that people will come into this book and read about it to understand how they can really get back to the core of who they truly are, finding happiness and fulfillment through the radical art of lessening. I love it.
Yes, yes.
So what would you say is the unique teaching in your book that you really want
Yes.
people to understand? What's the core that you really want people to take away when they pick this book up?
Yeah, the thing that I really want to communicate with people that inspired me to write the book is that you are whole and complete from the very beginning. There is nothing wrong with you. That is what I want people to know, right? We have trained ourselves and we have been trained by the world to believe that. It's not our fault that we believe that,
Yes.
but it's a lie. And that we are actually whole and complete from the very beginning. And with, trusting some truths that have been handed down to us over the centuries that I've tried to present in a way that is understandable to people, whatever their spiritual or non-spiritual path may be, and cultivating some of these practices to help us reconnect with this kind of just basic, simple truth of our lives, moment to moment, is the way to reconnect with that truth that has always been there, but that we have forgotten, in the course of our lives. So that's my hope. If people take away anything from the book, I want it to be that. I really, really believe that it's true, and
Yes.
may it be so.
May it be so beautiful. I mean, yes to all of that. And actually I just want to say thank you, because there's so many beautiful practices. I love that you're offering the guided meditations in audio form as well. I would love to listen rather than read through it myself. So that's beautiful that you can do both. And just thank you for your presence and for doing this work that's so needed in the world, helping us really learn how to step into meaningful, fulfilling, and happy, the happiness that's available to us if we can just recognize the beautiful beings that we are. So I just want
Thank
to
you.
thank you so much. And I really appreciate you. Thank you for joining, Billy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really an honor. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I do ask all of my guests the same question at the end. And
Yes,
I know you've kind of just wrapped it up so beautifully in a bow,
yes,
but I'm
yes,
still going to ask you the question, and that is,
yes. Please.
what is your soulful sound to the world? So that's just a prayer or desire that you wish upon the world.
Yes. So if you're listening right now, come back to where you are, right here. Hear the sound of this voice, feel the temperature of the room, feel your body sitting in its seat or wherever it might be. That's all you need. That's all you need right now. It's all right here. So, and I'm here with you. And thank
Oh,
you for having me in this
oh,
space.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Take care.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you, you too.
If you love this episode, hit that like and subscribe button and make sure to check out our other episodes. Thank you so much for tuning in, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are.